Hello, and welcome back to Transylvaniacs, the incredible journey of two good friends who are on a merciless, relentless, sometimes silly, sometimes hilarious, sometimes very boring quest to watch as many Dracula adaptations as humanly possible.
Each episode, we try and watch every Dracula movie from Dracula A to Dracula Z. Colleen, would you maybe call this a voyage?
Oh, I would call this a voyage, and I missed an opportunity there. Shit. We have a very special episode today because we are looking at the recent release, The Last Voyage of the Demeter, and we are joined by our good friend Sarah Lawrence. Hello, Sarah.
Hello.
Sarah is a friend of mine and Will's from college. If you would like to introduce yourself, kind of tell us a little bit about what you do, all that good stuff, that would be lovely.
Sure. Well, I used to write on the same movie blog as Will back in the day, and we lived in the same house very briefly in a theme house, which is chaos.
Yes.
And now I live in Texas, and I'm a marketing person, and still a giant nerd, so there's
Truly
that.
A giant nerd.
Yeah.
I'm going to plug all your stuff because
Oh, sure.
I know you are also an illustrator, a really talented artist, and also have been on a couple of podcasts, but I think the one people can find upon the internet is All My Hexes, which is a Monster of the Week real play podcast in which you play somebody from Minnesota, which really tickles me to this day.
If you would like to hear several hours of me doing a Minnesota accent, please look up All My Hexes. It has been on pandemic hiatus, but it is not dead.
Not dead.
Only sleeping.
Let it be fucking known.
Only sleeping. Yeah, it is. Sorry for the cliffhanger, but I promise we're going to make more of it.
I love that very much. But thank you so much for joining us today. You are our second whole guest, and obviously, because you also know Chris, because we all went to college together, we were required by law to have him on Any Hammer Horror.
Yeah,
but I feel like this was a good match for you because you are a kind of creature design and special effects aficionado and have an artist's eye. And this is a contemporary film, and I feel like you keep up on current horror probably a lot better than most other human people I know. So welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I used to, specialize in sci-fi and B-horror for the website, and creature features are my own, have their own little special place in my heart. So
truly,
this is definitely up my alley.
So a little bit about what we're talking about today. This is kind of not out of left field, but it is different than what we've been doing on the podcast. If for some bizarre reason you were just joining us, Will and I are working our way through Dracula adaptations semi-chronologically, starting with straight adaptations and then getting progressively sillier. However, we have been blessed in 2023 with two new releases directly about Dracula and Dracula-adjacent material. So we are required by law, actually, to watch this and do it for the show. So
we talk about Dracula and Dracula accessories. We have to.
That's good. Have you been saving that, or did you just come up with it?
That just came to me. I can't believe it didn't come earlier, honestly.
I'm pretty impressed. But yeah, we are looking today at The Last Voyage of the Demeter, which came out in theaters earlier this summer in the month of August. It's been out for a couple weeks now. And Sarah, I think you're the only one of us who actually saw this in theaters.
Yeah, I went opening weekend by myself, like a giant nerd.
A lot better at our job than we are, because both of us saved this until this week and watched it in our houses.
Well,
just because we are Dracula podcasters doesn't mean we are good Dracula podcasters.
I am very blessed to live in the land of Alamo Drafthouse, and they will bring me a beer and a cheeseburger while I watch these movies. So it's very motivating to get out of my house and go to the movies.
Wow. Okay. I don't even know what the fuck that is. Is that a Southern thing? Is that a Texas thing?
Oh, yeah, it's a movie theater chain that started here in Texas. I think in Austin actually, and they serve you food and drink while you watch your movie. And they're not the only ones that do it now, but they are incredible, and they do a lot of fun events and stuff. I went to a costume showing of Renfield, for example.
Oh.
So.
See, in Philadelphia, we have a movie tavern, which is that same
Yeah.
concept, but worse on fundamentally every level.
Oh no!
In
Well, you guys will have to
Pittsburgh,
come visit me. Yeah.
they like, I don't know, I put you on a bridge and you get a pierogi from a food truck. Like that's all I can think of. We don't have any. We probably have plenty of cool things. The Row House Theater here is very cool, but I don't know how much they do new releases. But yeah, we'll all have to like do dinner and a movie, but like simultaneously sometime.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
That sounds delightful.
Yeah.
But before we kind of get into this, much like Renfield, we're going to go a little faster, a little looser with this one because we try to keep some kind of structure to the show just because, as we've said many times, Will and I have a really bad case of like cannot fucking stop talking disease. So if we don't have any guardrails on, this will be toast immediately. But we have a safety here. Her name is Sarah. and this is very fresh for both of us. So I figure we just get into it. But before that, Will, could you give us our cast and crew of this beautiful film that we all just partook in?
Absolutely. So this one is a little different. We don't have the same cast of characters that we've had for many of our Dracula adaptations. We have as our main character Corey Hawkins playing Clemens, who is a black doctor who is trying to get passage from Romania back to England under the sailing under Captain Elliot, played by Liam Cunningham. He has a crew that includes David Dastmalchian as Wojciech, Woody Norman playing Toby, which I believe is Captain Elliot's grandchild. Who are some of the other? Petrovsky and Nikolai Nikolaev. Stefan Kabachik, who is playing Olgarin, who is actually one of the characters, one of the like two characters mentioned by name in the Demeter chapters of Dracula. We got Chris Wally as Abrams, and then we also have playing a character created for this movie, Aisling Franciosi playing Anna. And then we've got Javier Botet, who is a creature actor, has been in a lot of things, including The Conjuring, It, and I think Andrei Ofredal's last movie, Scary Stories of the Town of the Dark, playing Dracula himself.
Very nice, very nice. So like Will kind of alluded to, we don't have our regular cast of characters here. If you could not tell from the title, this entire film, all 2 hours of it, is extrapolated from the single chapter of the original novel titled The Captain's Log, which details, again, because it's an epistolary novel, is all of the writings of Captain Elliot, describing the curse that befalls his crew as they transport Dracula and his boxes of dirt from Transylvania to Whitby in England. So this does not have any other relation to the rest of the Dracula story. It is a singular chunk. It's kind of taking the Star Wars approach, where they were like, let's take as minute a setting as possible and go absolutely balls to the wall with it. So a very loose outline kind of what happens here is, again, we have Clemens, our main character, who is a Black English doctor who is going back from Romania to England after being essentially denied a job that he was offered for the King of Romania due to his race. Then we have Captain Elliot and his grandson, and it essentially, after finding Anna, who is, again, a character created for this film, a young Romani woman buried within one of the wooden crates filled with dirt, which is a hell of a fucking image, finding her on the ship and realizing something is going terribly wrong here, losing all their livestock, and then watching the crew, every single person, with the exception of Clemens, be picked off one by one, either as food for Dracula or turned into vampires themselves. And it is that exactly. It is, I believe I have seen this described as Alien, but on a boat. And I think that's pretty apt. So that's our kind of loose outline here. This is not referencing much other than the setting and a few characters by name. But it is kind of a fun little film. Sarah, since you were our guest, and again, we're going to go kind of fast and loose with this.
Yeah.
What did you think of this, just like on the whole?
I enjoyed it. I thought it was like a fun creature feature. I've seen it twice now. So I rented it on streaming to bone up for this podcast. And I enjoyed watching it again, I would say. I mean, if we're gonna like take some big swings, all right.
Please swing away.
I like the Dracula design, but I have some issues. So I don't know. I might be jumping the they a little bit, but
no, do it up. I want to hear about this.
It.
That's why we got you on there. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I agree that it is definitely like an Alien attempt. They showed Dracula like pretty early,
Mm-hmm.
and like pretty often, I would say.
Yeah.
And for viewers or for listeners out there rather who have maybe not seen the movie, the most important thing to understand is the reason that this is a creature feature is because Dracula spends essentially the entire movie in full Batman form. He is bestial through and through. There is no humanity in this Dracula, I would say, which is a choice. And I will say that was like maybe the most disappointing thing for me is just that he's this like super cool monster and you get to see him really early on, and I think if you've seen other Dracula adaptations, the expectation is that as he feeds, he gets either more human or more robust, or in some capacity, this is like his decrepit form as he's unable to be anything other than this hideous gargoyle. But that doesn't really happen. He just kind of continues to be a man bat the whole time. So I was like, okay. My biggest disappointment is that we just never got like a hot Dracula. We just only ever got gargoyle Dracula. And I don't, that like lack of evolution for me, just, it robbed me a little bit, I think, of some tension that is normally present, is you're always expecting the evolution of the monster, and we didn't really get that.
Yeah, no, I'm totally in agreement with you there. Just kind of going right into talking about our man Drac. I think that if you are trying to do Alien, what makes Alien work is just razor sharp, pants shitting tension.
Mm-hmm.
And when you show us the monster right away, you lose some of that tension, and then the monster remains that way for the next 2 hours. It is hard to be on the edge of your seat. I do think this was fun, and I definitely will watch it again because I think it's kind of like a niche thing that like I just kind of liked, and I haven't seen much like it before. But I definitely agree with you that I think the choice to keep our main man in bat form for the entirety of the film with, like you said, no development. Like, Dracula is the main character of the book, obviously, and this, just regales, no. What's the word I'm thinking of?
Resigns,
thank you. Resigns into being just like the monster. And
yeah. Mm-hmm.
As we know, he's so much more than that, and that's why I feel like the novel is kind of enduring, is because he's actually an interesting antagonist who is very clever and very manipulative and very brutal. But this just really goes hard in on the brutality. Will, what's your read on all that?
I'm not going to disagree with you about any of that, but here is my maybe spicy take. I kind of liked him being a gross little monster because, Colleen, you know very well that we have spent months with actors being like, I'm going to play Dracula, but this time, I'm going to play Dracula sexy. I'm going to make Dracula so hot. And after just hearing so many actors talk about how they're going to, like, uncork the sensuality of Dracula. I was fully ready for just Dracula to be a gross little freak for like 2 hours straight.
Okay. No, I could vibe with that. Yeah, he is absolutely it's 2 hours a goblin, like for sure.
And he's so wrinkly and gross. Like the skin texture is just awful. I was like howling in delight, which is maybe why it was a good thing that I watched this in the comfort of my home instead of in a theater where I would be expected to comport myself with some dignity.
Oh my god.
Look, I'll tell you, I laughed out loud twice in theaters.
Nice.
Once at the beginning where Captain Elliot is like, after this one, I'm going to retire. And I was like,
yes.
And I was like, I literally can't with this. And then at the end, when the substantive change for Dracula is that he does get wings at some point.
Yes, he gets wingies.
He does get wings. And they have like a full tilt Pacific Rim, oh my god, it has wings moment. And that's the second time that I laughed out loud.
That's so fucking funny. Holy shit. Will, you know what? Your point is well taken. I think especially in comparison to, as you said, all of our like annoying, suave Louis Jourdans out there. I think that in terms of the portrayals of Dracula, this is refreshing. I think in terms of carrying the tension of the film, it did not work the way they wanted it to. But I see both of your points. They've been seen.
You do make a really good point, though, and I think it's funny because I was watching this, and the design reminded me, it's clearly got sort of the bat ears, so it's got that Orlok influence, but It feels very strongly influenced by the rendition of Kurt Barlow from the 70s version of Salem's Lot. And I feel like that is actually I think that is an interesting point because if you're not familiar with Salem's Lot, in the original book, Kurt Barlow is very much just a Dracula analog, like book Dracula. Mm-hmm. He is suave, he is smart, he is constantly confounding the heroes at every turn and poses this terrifying physical but also intellectual threat for them. They have to figure out how to outsmart somebody who has lived for centuries and bested so many enemies. And then in the Tobe Hooper film adaptation, he's, again, just kind of a gross freak. And it is one of the best monster designs of the 70s, but it is a very different story. And I think this has that same thing, where you're not getting Dracula as an intellectual threat or as somebody who is going to match wits with these characters. He's purely like an animal that is scurrying around.
What's wild to me is that this is the same director that did Autopsy of Jane Doe, right? So
yeah, I believe so.
He's already done a one-room horror movie with a corpse that slowly develops its own character and terror. And so like that is and that to be clear, loved Autopsy of Jane Doe. I think
really good.
Fantastic. It's a super, super solid horror movie. And so I was expecting a little bit more from this, and maybe that's on me, like my expectations were differing. But you know, I know he can do it. I know he can do character development with a character that doesn't talk. Like I know it's possible and it's scary and like it's possible, but we just didn't quite get there. And then to set up, you know, and then they had to set Clemens as the empathetic character, right? And I don't know that I was completely bought into that either, but maybe I'm just jaded.
I think that's valid though. And like, I'm a big fan of a very closed, set, tight bottle episode. You know, I love that kind of shit. So I was kind of also in the same boat there where I wanted it to kind of ratchet up the fear a little more. And I think that some of that comes down to not only the stuff with the choice to have Dracula not have any lines, but the pacing of the script, I feel like was kind of hit or miss, because there were some sections of this that I did find genuinely very interesting and engaging. But I think this and Renfield should have like switched writers. Does that make sense? Because like Renfield was too short and they leaned on the actors for like a really slapdash script. And this was too long in parts where it really didn't have to be. Like you said, him being like, I'm going to retire after this one. Like, we don't need that. We already know. We know how this fucking ends. So I feel like if Renfield was 2 hours long and this was a tight 90, they might have both been better movies, but maybe I'm also just on crack here.
No, you're right. This is a movie that felt like in its bones should have been 90 minutes, should have been a tight 90. And then when I was going to rent it and I saw the runtime, I'm like, surely this can't be right.
Yeah. That was me roughly 3 hours ago.
Actually, I guess, like, speaking of that, like, how did you guys feel about the inclusion of Anna? Because I'm not totally sure that we needed it, and, like, which, far from me to, like, hi, I would like less women in my movies. No, that's not the case. However, I just didn't, I mean, I think it was to aid the audience, but it would have, to have someone in the know is very strange. And so that's like a huge, like on Alien, no one really knew what the fuck was going on. And so, like, halfway through this movie, or not even, they're like, oh, here's what's going on. And you're like, oh, okay. Oh, cool. Okay. I guess that's what's happening. Was kind of, maybe that contributed to some of the steadiness of the pacing, let's say.
Yeah, I actually think that's a really good point, and I did not think of it that way, is that, like, not only do we have the visual spoiled, but we have all of the lore spoiled, again, like, a third of the way into the movie. Like, here is what's happening. And that does kind of pull the rug out from under the whole thing. So I think that's a really good point. I think as a character, I liked the idea, like, I liked her backstory, I think, more than I liked her. Like, for reference, what happens in the film is that Anna, the young woman who is found, again, in a crate of dirt, which is horrifying, was essentially sacrificed by her town, which is a small Romani town at the edge of the castle, as a peace offering to Dracula. Like, you can have her if you leave the rest of us alone, which is interesting, and I thought that lent kind of some fun new material to the legend that I enjoyed. But it is also probably a trope that has been really done to death, and probably could reflect poorly on it being Romani. Like, yes, take this girl, a young virgin, for sacrificing. Like, it could be read not great. What about you, Will? What'd you think?
That is, you're giving me a new perspective on it too. I think once she's on the ship, at the end she's a strong presence, especially as everyone else on the ship is just falling apart. Like, Captain Elliot just basically becomes broken down by the end. Yeah. And she gets to have this moment where she's like, no, I can finally for once take control of my destiny. And I think she anchors the end of that movie, but I think you do have a point. I feel like having somebody who can explain what is happening to the people on the boat takes away so much of the punch of that chapter, where it is a true mystery to everyone until it is much too late.
Well, and it's interesting because the movie feels like it's catering to two different audiences, where on one hand it really expects you to come in with a lot of Dracula knowledge, and then on the other hand it hands you a narrator to tell you what's going on. It's like the beginning of the movie. On my rewatch today, I was like, okay, so, like, in the beginning of the movie, where they're still at dock, and, like, the Romani folk are, like, leaving because they have to be gone by sunset, there's, like, a shot of dirt falling out of the box, and it's, like, framed as this, like, ooh, spooky dirt. And you're like, okay, cool, but if I was, like, just attending this movie with casual cultural osmosis of Dracula, I would have no idea what that means. And maybe I'm being a little, like, over generalizing, but, like, I don't know that that's, like, super commonplace. So it's just like, oh, okay, yeah, like, that's very ominous if you've read Dracula. Like, even, the sigil on the box, they're like, oh no, it's a dragon. It's like, yeah, okay, again, if you've read Dracula, you're probably fine, but if you're just, like, a casual everyday moviegoer, I don't know that would, like, mean a lot. So at first they're like, okay, cool, Dracula fans, you guys are gonna love this, and then they're like, non-Dracula people, we're gonna explain it to you. So it's, like, a little bit conflicting,
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
It felt like this is two different movies kind of happening at once, if that makes sense, because it feels like on one hand it is this no holds barred, grim alien in the 19th century movie. But it also feels like it's kind of a big or mid-tier budget action movie and has a lot of those beats. And can I spoil can I just jump ahead to the end real quick?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mind.
Because so at the end, everyone has gone through hell, and Clemens is truly the only survivor, and it fast forwards a little bit to him now in London, and he's committed himself to hunting Dracula and becoming a vampire killer. And it had this very like modern action movie vibe to it. And I feel like there was like the Marvel movie brain of me kept expecting them, because he had all these documents, and I was expecting at the end, because his whole thing was that, he couldn't get a job as a doctor in England, went to Romania, was coming back to find a job. I was fully expecting him to either have some documents or to meet up with like Dr. Seward or Dr. Van Helsing and be like, I have a job proposition for you.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
would have been like
so cool.
And it would have been like Marvel movies and stuff had like primed me for this, and it didn't actually happen. And I was like, oh, okay, never mind.
I think your point about this being two different movies for two different audiences is like at the core of why this is an extraordinarily middling film.
It is, yeah. And I wish that it had lent one way or the other. I expected sort of a VVH vibe when I went in, and came out feeling like it was much more of like a blockbuster attempt, which is kind of an interesting shot for a movie about like chapter 7 in Dracula to take, and Colleen, you said it right, like it's the Rogue One of Dracula, and it could have been I think quite, and it wasn't bad, like, to be clear, I enjoyed it.
No, it's not bad.
But yeah, I'm like, okay, like, so Clemens Van Helsing movie when, right?
Right, because that's a much more interesting movie.
Yeah, and then even at the end, like, when they had, like, one chance to show, like, oh, this is the Dracula that has, like, acclimated. He is, no longer a monster. He's functioning, at Carfax Abbey, and he's being dastardly. He's a fucking monster still.
But with a top hat on.
It is really funny, because he is trying to blend in, and he's the grossest looking dude, but wearing a top hat.
And James Melville went to go see it, told me that he looks like Mr. Burns, and I was like, yeah. He does. It's just like a full tilt Mr. Burns shot at the end, and you're like, well, all right.
Oh, fuck. That's so fucking funny. Will, you keep saying that he's wrinkly, and I kept thinking that he looked like a Sphinx cat.
Yes! Oh my god.
It's rank. It's fucking rank, dude. Sarah, what did you think of the, in terms of, the actual execution of some of the design and FX stuff in this?
I think it was largely good. It's clear that they did some practical work, right? They leaned on CGI to soften some things up, etc. But like we said, they have a pretty known, experienced creature actor in the Dracula suit, and that shows. There's, I think, my favorite shot of creature interaction, I guess, is very early on. The first time you see, I think, the full body of Dracula is when he's on the deck. And the guy's like, well, where did you come from? And then he just fucking launches at him, and it's great. But that little pose of Dracula just creeping on the deck is great. And that's the kind of stuff that gives me goosebumps. Yeah. And I was like, okay, this is what I want to see. That's alien vibes, right? Just slithering through the darkness. There is some, there's some stuff that could be, I don't know, maybe they got a little carried away in post. Some very messy blood that feels a little bit excessive. And not in a, oh no, too much blood. That's rarely a problem for me, but it is more that it just kind of looks gooshy in a way that's not.
Yeah, I thought that the practical effects and the makeup for certain parts was really outstandingly good. The section where Captain Elliot gets burned.
Yeah.
And then they have his burns kind of healing, and they're his skin is charred and falling off, and then the fresh skin underneath it is shiny and bloody. That looked really fucking good.
Oh, there was really solid attention paid. Like even when Toby, like they do this long extended shot of Toby in the water. Um, but like you can see like pieces of charcoal flesh like flecking off of him as he sinks, and I was like, that's gross, but also detailed. Like
Yeah, extremely detailed.
You know, like I stand. I think the wound special effects are very good. All the torn throats looked great.
Looked great, yeah.
You know, stuff like that. So I can always applaud a movie that, you know, at least attempts to lead with practical, and you know, uses CGI where it's appropriate. Obviously, Flying Drac had some. I think
Left a little to be desired.
Well, I think it's just you have some interesting anatomy decisions to make. So, like, again, for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, I mean, just look up the monster if you can, because they show it to you right away in the movie anyway, so it's not really a spoiler. But since he literally has this like giant webbing that goes from his ankles to his wrists, it is like. I mean, they literally had to make some decisions for anatomy that like would not
were weird.
That were weird, right? You know, that just didn't I'd feel natural in any capacity. And I think that like for that, some of the CGI may have been, or some of the digital work maybe is the better way to say it, but may have been a little bit over the top. But I think overall, like all of the creature work itself was pretty solid.
Nice. Speaking of, I feel like we should talk a little bit about some of the actors in this. So let's start with our man Clemens. And talk a little bit about Clemens as a character, because again, this is a character that was created, I'm pretty sure, for this. Like I said, I think it's just Elliot and Olgarin who are referenced by name in the actual chapter. But Corey Hawkins is a very talented actor. Some of you might know him. He was actually in the Coen Tragedy of Macbeth. He was in Black Klansman. He does a lot of theater work, which you can actually tell.
Yeah,
he was in a production of Romeo and Juliet in 2014 where he played Tybalt.
Oh.
Yeah, that was filmed, and I would have really liked to see, because he's very talented. Mm-hmm. I think the issue is that Clemens is tragically underwritten.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
We see this a lot in like 90% of action films, is that he has a really bad case of like good guy protagonist syndrome, where that's kind of all we get. And in this case, it's good guy protagonist syndrome, but also racism. And it's like, we should probably have a little more on both of those fronts, and then a third thing, perhaps, you know?
Yeah, it felt like his backstory was rooted in his race. And obviously
Right.
It's an important thing to talk about and an important thing to address. And like in the time period, like it is profoundly realistic that, you know, I mean, he literally makes a comment like, you know, my credentials reached Romania, but not my race. And so they like turned him around for being black, which is obviously garbage. But it's also what, like 18 something, 90,
Yeah, 18,
whatever.
Yep, 1897.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes. And so like that is obviously a huge part of his character. Although I did appreciate that they really only went with one attempt to villainize the crew that way.
Yes, agreed.
Where it was only that like very Russian sailor that was
Yes.
like, I don't like that you're black. And he was like, cool. And then they killed him in like the next 10 minutes. The Russian
Yeah,
guy,
literally
I mean,
the next scene, he was toast.
It was like, in case you were wondering if the rules of horror movies still applied, they do.
They do indeed.
So, and so I was like, all right, at least they didn't make it like harp on it like too much, but it just felt like woefully underbaked. You know.
Yeah, he did not have a lot of qualities other than being kind of sad and noble.
Noble is the perfect
noble,
word.
sad, noble. You are correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
There was one part that I did really like, that like where he really tapped into something with his delivery that the rest of the movie did not really touch upon. Or at the end of it's towards the end of the movie when they're making their plan to kill Dracula. He has a line that is something along the lines of, I need to find out what this thing is and show it in the world that they can't kill me.
Yeah, dude.
And it is this moment of like, no, this is going to be the way that I am going to find out what this thing is, and I am going to kill it. and the world cannot take that from me. And it was just like, it had a lot of, there's drive and some real determination that he did not have at any other point in that movie. And unfortunately,
Yes.
does not have any point after that, because he kind of immediately kind of rolls and crit fails on trying to attack Dracula and is really kind of saved by Anna a bunch.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, they try and have that like deep moment in the cabin for like when he first gets there and like, what are you gonna do with your cut? And he's like, oh, money is I don't need money. I just need to understand the world. And you're like, oh, that was an attempt. That's nothing, but okay. I appreciate that you went there. However,
And then they do it again better.
Yeah.
Like,
yes, exactly.
yeah, I'm like, you could have just saved that for the end because that's so much more interesting. And it at that point, we know that he was turned around when he got to Romania. We know that he, was the first Black person to graduate Cambridge. Like, we know so much more about him. So him just saying that at the beginning just kind of makes him look like an asshole.
Yeah. He hadn't really earned it yet. Yeah.
Right. But yeah, you're right, Will. I really liked that moment where he shows a little more other than like, I am the good guy who is saddened. And we're like, I am the good guy and I'm not fucking around. And that felt a lot more exciting to watch in an actual protagonist. But Corey Hawkins definitely like did what he could with a pretty milquetoast role.
Yeah.
And then we have Aisling Franciosi as Anna, who is actually billed second in this, which is interesting to me. We talked a little bit about Anna's inclusion, but in terms of her performance, I also am kind of middling on her. Like, I think she did what she could with, again, a role written for this film. But I will say that we've talked about a bit. The last third, she is much more of a powerhouse writing-wise, and I did enjoy watching her quite a bit.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there was a lot of times where she basically was like, you boys are being dumb. I'm going to solve this problem with a gun. And it worked. And that was fine.
Mm-hmm. Good for her.
Yeah, very, very that. And I would agree. I think it was middling, but it was, a good attempt at the character. And the last third was certainly much stronger.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I feel like when they pull her out of that dirt, that moment is horrifying. And then what follows after that is pretty bog standard stuff. Oh wait, are these guys concerned that bringing a woman on board is a bad thing? It's cursed. Oh no. And it follows a pattern that I've seen in a lot of other movies until she really kind of makes a grab for some agency at the end. And I wish we got a little more of that, because she spends a lot of, I'd say, the first act kind of delirious and not really saying anything, just kind of laying in a cabin.
As you do.
I mean, really the only lowest of low bars is that there was no assault or molestation or jokes, really, which was really nice.
Yeah, and that's bleak, isn't it?
It is.
But here we are.
Yep.
Next up, we have Liam Cunningham as Captain Elliot, who some of you may know is playing Seaworth in Game of Thrones. He's been in a lot of movies, but he's an Irish actor. You will recognize him. He has a recognizable face. But this was interesting to me. He has a little bit more physical presence than some of the other actors that I enjoyed watching him. I think he physically looks like an older captain, and like he had that kind of world weariness that I appreciated. But it wasn't too stock of a character. Like, I think particularly his relationship with his grandson Toby was very like kind of distant in a predictably English way, but strangely tender in a way that I thought brought a lot to this character.
The scene where they are about to push Toby into the water is honestly,
oh, God.
I hesitate to say favorite because that feels like the wrong word, but it is probably the strongest
Yeah.
scene in the movie for me, because it encapsulates, action and fear, and like all the characters have something to do in that scene, and like there's surprise and there's horror, like literal physiological, psychological horror. And then Liam Cunningham just like absolutely knocks the trauma and the grief out of the park. I mean, yeah, incredible.
Yeah, I think the way his arc goes is so interesting. He starts out as this very stentorian, very strong, stiff upper lip kind of character, and seeing the way that he deals with this tremendous loss and this grief, and how he falls apart at the end. He is given the opportunity to escape the boat, and he chooses to go down with the ship, not out of any real sense of pride, but more of where else would I go? What else do I have in the world?
Yeah. And then, tying himself to the wheel is a kind of iconic moment, and I'm glad that we got that image.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that's like, he's one of the few characters, maybe the only character that has like a defined fate in the book, right? So like,
Yes.
he had to get to that moment at some point. I'm also now just remembering the dog is also canonical. So that's 3.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Spoiler for those of you who are big fans of DoesTheDogDie.com. The dog does in fact die, and it is fucking grisly.
It's
brutal.
It is the thing grisly. So be extremely wary if gore, particularly involving animals, affects you.
Yeah, they do not shy away from showing.
They
it.
really don't.
So yeah.
But speaking of Toby, let's talk about our little guy here. Toby is played by Woody Norman, who is like 13 years old. Looks like a child. He's just very small, but was probably about 12 when this was filmed. I was really blown away by this little guy. Kids in horror films tend to do one of two things. One of is be creepy, the other is be annoying. He was neither, and I was pleasantly surprised by that.
He had like this earnestness that I just will like forever appreciate. I mean, when he has that little exchange with Clemens after all the livestock dies, it's just so like precious. Like, and I don't mean like I relish in his misery. It was just like he just brought such an honesty to that role. You just believed that this kid cared so deeply about his tasks on the ship. He just wanted to do right by his grandpa, and that was just such a sweet earnestness.
That is one of the real surprises with this movie, is because he gives such a great performance, and you're immediately endeared to this kid as you watch him on board. And so you're watching, is like, surely he's gonna get, like, the people who are gonna get off this boat are probably gonna be Clemens, probably Anna, and Toby's gonna be there. They're gonna get this kid off the boat. And when he gets attacked by Dracula, it is just a gut punch.
Oh, and that's the other like good Drac scene too, is because he like literally alien crawls down the wall for that, and you're just like,
sick.
Oh, it was so creepy, and you're like, oh, they are just gonna kill a child. They're gonna kill dogs, y'all, and they're gonna kill kids. And this movie does not care.
And like, it is rare to see a child killed on screen.
Yes,
it is rarer to see a child killed violently on screen, and it is even more rare to see the result of that. So having him basically, Toby is killed by Dracula as they are about to push him into the ocean. Elliot rips open the sheath of sailcloth covering him to reveal that he is a vampire. And because it's the middle of the day, the kid fucking immediately catches on fire, catches Clemens on fire. They push the kid into the water, and then there's, as Sarah mentioned, this long extended shot of like the severely burned corpse of a 9-year-old kid. And that is exceedingly rare for most media, especially a mainstream R-rated horror film. So that actually kind of caught me by surprise that they were able to get away with that, frankly.
Overall has that experience because he did, before this, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which is a horror movie for a younger audience, but he does not shy away from killing kids in some pretty upsetting ways in that movie. So
Jesus.
Truly, Andre Overdahl is the true fuck them kids champion of horror movies right now.
You might be right on that. Yeah, that might be
Oh,
the call of the
Christ
century.
But yeah, great job, little guy. Crushed it. Okay, I would say the only two that we really need to talk about still are David Dashmalshin as Vorchek, who is I think Polish. He's the first mate. He is in he's Thomas Schiff in The Dark Knight in the 2008 film. He's in the Ant-Man movies. He's in The Flash.
He was
he's in Suicide Squad.
Yeah, his Polka Dot Man in Suicide Squad was wonderful in that role.
Yeah,
he's
he
in
really was.
Dune. He's a like you'll recognize this guy's face.
Yes,
He has
yes.
a very specific face. But Warchek was interesting because I always, in anything where you've got like a captain authority figure and then the person directly below them, there is going to be some sort of personality clash. And I felt like Warchek was, at the beginning of the film, kind of a more stern and no-nonsense foil to Elliot's, like, strangely kind and tender demeanor. And then as the film goes on, steps into much more of a supporting role. And I kind of wish we'd gotten a little more from this character. He is one of the last ones to die, and his death scene is pretty great because, you know, the plan toward the end, when there's only a handful of them left, is to sink the Demeter. And he was like, this is my fucking house. Like, I live here.
Yeah.
I'm not sinking the goddamn ship. And then when he realizes there's no other choice, he takes the axe from Clemens and is like, okay, well, if we're going to do it, I'm going to do it. All right. And like that felt like a good mirror of Clemens saying, like, I want to know how this thing works so I can kill it. That kind of determination, I think was good. But
Yeah, well, and since he stood to inherit the boat once Elliot retired, so like he had this ownership, this half ownership of the boat itself, and so that was like a really powerful. I think he did a good overall job. I think you said foil is like exactly, and he was a great foil for Elliot. A little bit of the straight man, but then
definitely the straight man.
And then they kind of came, got a lot closer. But ultimately, I think a good addition in general.
And then we've got, actually two more. I lied. Stefan Kapicic. Oh God, this is like some fucking Cyrillic. I cannot pronounce that shit. So sorry, Stefan. Who plays Olgarin? Again, one of the only other named characters. I was pleasantly surprised by this character because until this moment, we have only seen, random members of the crew and all of the livestock just get straight up eaten. Like they got got. Olgarin is turned into a vampire, and that is when we actually get a really fucking crazy physical performance from this guy.
Oh my God, yeah.
Will, do you want to tell us a little bit about like your thoughts on his work, especially after he's turned?
I mean, it's great. He's this lumbering, kind of zombie-like vampire. There's a part where he is chasing Toby down into the captain's chambers, and he does basically the scene from The Shining with Jack Torrance with the axe, but he does that with his fucking face.
His own face.
Yeah, dude.
Just slamming his head into the door, and it is so brutal and so gross.
And like when this film does visceral, like it does it. It does it really well.
For sure. Yeah, I think Olgarin was my favorite character, TBH, because like pre-death, he's so engaging and like he has really good characterization, really good physicality the whole time, and then like post-death, he's incredible as like a villain. And even the scene where spoiler, they tie him up in the sun and he burns to death I mean, bone chilling. It's just him screaming it burns and burns over and over again is like Jesus, like
that was
hardcore
truly
stuff.
Chilling. I also really liked the way they made all of the vampires up in this with the like semi-translucent contacts.
I agree.
Great choice. And then last but not least, we have our man Javier Botet as Dracula, again a creature actor who's done all sorts of kooky shit, unbelievably good. I kind of almost wish there was less digital work so I could see more of his work. But at the first chunk of the film when he is in goblin mode as opposed to bat mode, this was giving this felt like updated Andy Serkis as Gollum.
Oh
and
yeah,
that was a huge compliment. Huge compliment.
Yes, I agree.
Really hard to act when you don't have any lines and you're probably wearing a really weird costume. I did not know this, but he has Marfan syndrome.
Okay.
Yeah, which leads to it's basically people who are like extremely tall and thin and like very long arms,
large hands sometimes.
Yeah,
it makes you uniquely suited to be a creature actor. Unfortunately, a lot of
it really does.
That play creatures have Marfans. Yeah,
not surprising. But he was also I didn't realize this. Like you said, Will, he's in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. He was Slender Man in the Slender Man movie, and another one because Will mentioned The Conjuring. He was in Crimson Peak.
Oh, yes.
Of course. Okay.
Yes. And he did a great job in that as well. This is going to be like a hard Dracula to rank because he be no talking.
He's wicked different than any of the other ones.
Wicked
y'all have
fucking
done.
different, dude.
And frankly, different than any of the ones you guys will do. I'm having trouble thinking of another representation similar. To this one.
I guess most similar would be Max Schreck in original Nosferatu. But nobody talks in that. So
you make a good point.
Yeah, thank you. Do either of you have any other things you want to mention about his performance? Or did we kind of hit it all already?
Nah, I think you just you got it in one.
Yeah.
Thank you. What did y'all think about the general direction and cinematography of this film?
I wrote a couple notes, and one of them is that I feel that the whole film could have stood to be dingier.
Yeah.
I love a boat movie. I don't know if you guys know this about me.
Oh my god, I don't.
I love a movie that is set on a sailing vessel. I saw Master and Commander maybe 3 times when it was in theaters when I was 12.
Oh my god.
And
shit.
It is, I really like just depictions of like ship life being this being intense and being like everyone's crammed together and it's dirty and it's kind of gross, but it's very tactile. And it felt like we should have had more of this in Last Voyage of Demeter, because it feels like it's a great design for the ship, but it feels there are a lot of shots where there's a lot of room and it is pretty well lit. It is very kind of flat, more action movie lighting. And I feel like so much of the tension of this could be ratcheted up if you really hammered home just how narrowly confined everything is and how kind of dark everything is. You don't have much in the way of natural light, so you're kind of viewing everything through shadow, through candlelight, and it really could have stood to have done more with that.
Yeah, now that you are saying it, that's perfect. I think it's like this thing I couldn't put my finger on, but you're right. The film doesn't feel claustrophobic at all.
Yeah.
Minus that one part where Toby is running through that hallway and has to like fit through the door to get to the captain's quarters.
Yeah.
And even then, the resulting captain's quarters are like huge comparatively. And every shot above deck in particular feels very expansive. And not very isolating at all. And even I think if they had shot it from slightly farther away and made the ship feel smaller, even though you have all this visual space, that could have maybe helped.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Especially at the end with all the fog, it just felt like there wasn't limitations, really,
Right. And like even in Alien, which takes place on like a giant spaceship, it feels claustrophobic.
Much more claustrophobic, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point, Will. My one thing I will say about the direction, cinematography, general design aesthetic of this film is that it looks like the exact midpoint between the kind of recent Call of Cthulhu video game that came out a couple of years ago and the first Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh my god. I had so many Pirates vibes while I was watching this that I was like, I don't know if this is just like my only brain reference for this, or it's genuinely
No, it looks the
reminding
same.
me.
It,
Okay,
it
good.
does.
Okay.
It looks the fucking same. And like,
Yeah,
I think
some
that
Bruckheimer vibes.
yes, it 100% I think leads to why this looks a little disconnected is because it is shot like a big budget action movie from 2004.
You are so right. Yeah. I think
Yep.
season 1 of The Terror is probably like my gold standard for like boat horror these days, and they have like a much more, I've said claustrophobic already, but like a much more claustrophobic like vantage of like all these guys just dealing with the space that they're given, and we didn't really get that in this movie, I would say.
Yeah, valid, honestly. In terms of like, you know, other production stuff, like music was very sparse, which I think is fine, but also felt like a little too overblown. Like they didn't go full Hans Zimmer, but they definitely used primarily like your standard strings and orchestral
Oh my god, thank you.
stuff.
My partner thinks it's super weird that I have a weird grudge against Hans Zimmer.
Yeah.
No,
I don't love Hans.
this is a Bear McCreary soundtrack. Which probably explains why it felt a little overblown at times. For any folks out there, Bear McCreary is mostly known, I think, for video game soundtracks at this point.
Yes.
And he's very talented and he's won many, many awards. But this, I would say that video game influence was probably present in the score a little bit.
Yeah, he did all the God of War games.
Yes. Yeah.
And has done some, I think he did Battlestar Galactica also.
I think you're right.
Yeah, he did Battlestar. Yeah. So like big epics, and I wanted this to be less of an epic, just as a note.
Yeah, just a little quieter.
But I feel like overall, even though there's a lot to talk about with this movie and like a lot of things that I think could have been better, I don't think it was by any means bad.
Oh, no. I had no issue watching it a second time, and I would watch it a third time for sure.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
It's fun. It does the trick. Will, do you want to tell us a little bit about how this has been received among critics?
This has been really all over the place. Critically, even amongst people I've talked to going into it, it felt like it has been very divisive. RogerEbert.com, Peter Sobczynski has been gave it a 3.5, so he's on the higher side. I'm going to highlight Variety's review because it is the one that is like actually exactly what we were saying, where it says, Last Voyage of Demeter review, a Dracula movie that's intriguingly old-fashioned until its conventional megaplex demon shows up.
Wow. Okay, yeah.
All right, yeah. Way to summarize our whole podcast. Thank you.
Damn,
Yeah.
Thanks, Variety. Fuck you guys. Just a couple of other like notes before we wrap up here. I did not realize this, but this film was caught in essentially development hell for like almost 2 decades.
Crazy.
Like Phoenix Pictures acquired the rights to this in 2003.
Oh my god.
Because so like the actual concept for this film was, you know, cooked up after seeing Bram Stoker's Dracula, and then in Bram Stoker's Dracula they use a miniature for the set of the Demeter for all the like huge shots of that, and then he was like, what if put Alien on chip? So that was from fucking 30 years ago, and then, you know, wrote all this, and then just shit kept hitting the fan for actual eons. I think at some point Noomi Rapace was going to be in this.
Really?
And then she wound up doing Prometheus instead. So like they didn't actually start filming this until like, you know, a year or two ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I also feel like some of the lackluster box office response, because this is like a certified flop. Like the budget was 45 million and it brought in 23. Like it is a certified fucking flop. I feel like some of that though is because Renfield came out 4 months ago.
I mean, from my perspective, and I'd say probably your perspective, Universal releasing 2 Dracula movies within 4 months of each other is pretty good for us, but...
Oh, it's great for us.
Yeah, for, like, everyone else on the planet, maybe a bit much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the marketing was so conflicted for Demeter, too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was a part of the issue.
And like you said, this was made for 2 audiences and it was 2 different movies, so it makes sense that the marketing was also kind of a train wreck.
My favorite was I was watching YouTube and a YouTube ad for it came up, and it felt like they clearly had no way how to market it, because I'm watching it and I hear the opening lines to Bullet with Butterfly Wings by Smashing Pumpkins, which starts out with, "The world is a vampire." And I actually burst out laughing.
I did not see that trailer. That's incredible.
Oh my god, that's funny. Holy shit. Yeah, any other just like last like thoughts, like things you wanted to comment on that you couldn't fit in anywhere else?
Yes. This is now the second of these movies between this and Renfield where I thought they were like gearing up for a reveal of another Universal monster, and then they absolutely did not.
Damn it.
Because I talked in the last one about how there's in the Lobo family like torture basement, they have like someone behind a screen that looks like it's some kind of experiment. I'm like, is this Frankenstein? Are they gonna just throw Frankenstein in the third act of this movie? And a similar thing happened in this movie when they're going through the crates of dirt, and they open one of them and they do this slow reveal where they pull out a cane that has a silver wolf handle.
Yes.
And for a hot second, I'm like, wait, is that the cane from the Wolfman? Are they just somehow also doing like a Larry Talbot Wolfman thing? And then no, that is just Dracula's cane. You know, the famous cane that Dracula has.
Yeah.
That he needs for flying.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fucking A. Oh, man. Oh, Sarah, anything from you?
No, I mean, really, I just wish that this was a movie that didn't tell us it was a Dracula movie and surprised us with it. That would have been, I mean, if you knew enough to know about the Demeter, then you might have known going in, but I really just wish they had marketed it much differently.
Real.
But, you know, we'll never know what that universe looks like, so.
My last final closing thought is a really annoying screenwriting nitpick. Which is when Captain Elliot is giving one of his not final speeches, but like when he's realizing that like shit's hitting the fan and like they're not going to make it out of here. He says something along the line, like he has a really raw line that's like, "We're not making it out. Like the creature is dragging us out of here and you know where." And you're like, damn, that's a raw line. And then he looks and goes, "To hell, Clemens." It's like, God. I know. I fucking know.
Yeah, we
what
know.
The fuck? We know it's to hell. You didn't have to finish the line. God fucking damn it.
This movie simply,
so annoying.
At no point, trusts you to make any connections yourself.
Jesus Christ.
You're so right. It really does.
Thank you. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us in this hilarious little voyage. Hello. I will put all of the various places people can find your things in the description of this episode.
Yes.
But we adore having you on and talking about wrinkly faces.
I adore being on here to talk about the bat who was a man.
Please come back anytime.
I think I have maybe told Colleen that it is mandatory to have me on for Dracula Untold when you get there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I have literally already marked that down.
It is
when the time
maybe
comes.
my favorite Dracula movie of all time. So.
Oh, God.
I have no shame
for us for that one.
It's going to be great. I'm so excited for you.
Yay. Well, thank you all for joining us again, and we will catch you next time.
Bye.
Wait a minute. It is Colleen from the future, here to read you a tweet because we forgot to, and I have literally been saving a tweet for this very occasion, all right? This one comes from @RealJaredGilman, which, for the record, is the kid from Moonrise Kingdom. However, the tweet is, "She Dracula'd on my boat till I Demetered. See you next time.